Michigan fans, respect Northwestern. Come on, give them some respect. A little love this week, a little attention. Let's not be looking down the road. The Wildcats are in town, and it's a big noon kickoff, so it's got to be important. Got Justin Rowe on the line, of course, from Blue by 90 podcast. So join him right there. We got his Twitter handle. You got to check it out on the banner and follow him on Twitter immediately. Justin, how you doing today?
Doing well. It was a well needed week off from Michigan football. It was nice to sit back and watch some games stress free after that game against Nebraska that had 2 weeks of stress in it. But coming off the bye week here, I think people are very excited, no matter the opponent, just to be back in the big house, and I know the team is too. Jim Harbaugh even talked in his presser on Monday that their Sunday night practice coming off the bye week was, in his tenure here at Michigan, the best practice on a bye week that they've ever had. So they had a ton of energy. It wasn't like they were, had a little fog to get out of. They're hitting the ground running, ready to go in the second half of this season.
Please like the video, folks. Share these videos out on social media. It helps build the channel, and subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. And again, you see Justin right there, Justin Rowe 92 on Twitter. Follow him there, and his podcast, Blue by 90. All right, Northwestern, we'll give you some respect in a second. We're going to get to the news of the day, and that involves recruiting. It's the 16th rated class according to 247 Sports right now, and there is a commit, Damani Dent, out of Jacksonville, Florida. So I'll let you take off on this, Justin, because it's not just about this particular commit or some recent decommits, but kind of the overall picture of that 2022 class.
Yeah, I think, there was a lot of this class was affected by everything that happened last year for Michigan football in 2020. A 2-4 season, a stretch of the offseason that went longer than a lot of people wanted to, where nobody knew what Jim Harbaugh was going to do. Is he going to be the coach of Michigan? Is he not? Are they firing him? Is he resigning? Who knows what's going on there for that stretch? And then he ends up coming back. I think that did affect this class. But when you look at it right now, you have a lot of lower level guys, unfortunately. So they are ranked 16th in the country, as you said, but that class is made up of 1 5-star in Will Johnson out of Michigan, and then 2 4-stars and 15 3-stars. So I don't have the data to back this up, but I would be very intrigued to know the last time that Michigan had 15 3-stars in a class. And so, and that's saying that through bad years of Brady Hoke and Rich Rod. They still were pretty good on the recruiting trail, just couldn't get it done on the field. And so, I guess the question I have, and nobody has the answer to this, I'm sure, is Jim Harbaugh and his staff going for guys that they want in their locker room more than guys that are just straight up talented and have the stars? And so that's what I would have to believe is going on. The culture and the core values. I had punter Brad Robbins on our podcast this past week, and he talked about that this was the first year that Jim Harbaugh had the team put together a list of core values for their team. And so I think they're trying to recruit guys that would fit into that mold more than just going after every 4 and 5-star that's on the board. And so that's what I'm going to chalk it up to. And I think most Michigan fans would hope that that's the thing. But, we said it here before we jumped on, Mark, how many diamonds in the rough of 3-stars can you really find? Maybe 5 you can say that are guys that should be 4-stars or are going to pan out and they'll be able to develop. But to say that they're going to be able to develop 15 underrated guys and make them, out project their talent, I don't know if that's going to be the case and if it's going to work out for Michigan down the road.
Yeah, so I'm not a recruiting guy, but I talk to tons of recruiting people almost every day, and some of it's rubbed off on me, and I pay attention and understand math fairly well. Okay, so because when you talk to most college football fans that aren't into recruiting, they just think Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, they bring in nothing but like 5-stars and some 4-stars. Well, that's not the case. There's only like 35 stars walking around America each and every year. So those guys are very rare. Then you got to you got a good 300 to 400 4-stars. But even if you look at those very top recruiting classes, they do sign 3-stars that become dependable players, role players, program players, stars. They're all over the place. Obviously, the trajectory and the projection is all over the place on any individual. But speaking about the mass volume of numbers and what the trends tell us is that, and I'm being general here, if you take those top classes in the country, 20 or 30% of the class is the 3-stars. And again, those are the guys that they're depending on to just fill roles, be special teams players. And if one of them breaks through and becomes a great player, that's a bonus. So it's not, when it's 85% of the class, it doesn't seem right. They know what they're doing. I don't. But it would seem as though, hey, there would be more like 5 guys that they would think, hey, we really are sold on these guys. We don't care what the star says. But 15 out of 18.
Yeah, and I think you look at the rest of the classes for this 2022 recruiting class, and you look at the rest of the teams here. You know, Georgia, they do have 7 3-stars, but they have 11 4-stars and 2 5-stars. You know, Ohio State only has 1 3-star, but 14 4-stars. Notre Dame, 5 3-stars, 16 4-stars. So generally, you're correct. The teams that are in the top of those recruiting classes, they do get a 5 to 8, you know, a handful of 3-stars that will either, you know, pan out or fizzle off. And you know, we have seen here at Michigan, Ronnie Bell was a guy that was lowly ranked here, and he's panned out, sure, but he's one of, you know, maybe 10 over the past couple years that have done that. So it's very different. And so I think that, you know, to expect that even 10 out of those 15 pan out as legitimate players that can go up against Ohio State and beat them, I don't know if you can count on that. So when you're looking at what Jim Harbaugh is trying to build here, obviously they're trying to build a championship team. He's got to go out and beat Ohio State to have this fan base satisfied. I'm just not sure I'm not sure that what they've built for this 2022 class specifically is going to get that done.
Anybody want to try this? Go to any position on the football field, go to any year, go to 247 Sports, Rivals, wherever you want to go, and look at the position rankings for any position and go to multiple positions. Again, you can go back to 2017, pick any year you want, go to this year, whatever. And they'll have like 82 guards listed or whatever position you want. And it's obvious at the top. Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, and then as it filters down, Michigan, Notre Dame, and you will just see the program drop. Iowa, Kansas State, then you on down the FAU, Rutgers, whatever. You will just see the obvious progression of schools. Now, did the 40th guard in the country become some All-American player sometimes? Yeah, there are outliers, but 90% of the time, that program listing of who's signing those players in order almost is just dead on.
Absolutely. You know, I have a lot of people out there that say stars don't matter, recruiting doesn't matter. It's how you develop them when they get there. You got to have talent to develop. You have to have something to go off of. And guess what? It's a lot easier to develop a guy that comes in as 6'8", 320 at left tackle than a guy that comes in at 285, right, and doesn't have the skill set. So there's definitely something to say about how you develop your guys once you get there, and the culture and having them bought in, and all that definitely matters. Your on-field play, and once they're in that locker room, that matters. But in general, you're correct. If you look at, I'm sure it's lined up pretty closely, number of wins or successful seasons, whatever you want to call that, and the recruiting rankings, you could go side by side, and they're going to be pretty damn close, I'd say, if you had a chart going.
Yep. Texas is screwing up. Wisconsin develops players, and they rise. But other than that, just about everybody else is falling in line.
Yep.
Man, when you were talking about athleticism and a 6'8", 320 left tackle, I saw some video on Evan Neal, an All-American for Alabama, a couple weeks ago during one of the broadcasts. They showed him doing like a standing jump. This guy's like 6'8", and his 40 times ridiculous. All of his speed drills are ridiculous for a man of that size, but he can do like a standing jump, and it was some ridiculous height that he could jump to on a standing jump. It was crazy.
Those guys just blow my mind, because I think about myself. I'm 6'3", and there was a time when I was 19, 20 years old, and I was 6'3", 175 pounds, a twig, and still couldn't, control my body. And so for these guys to be that big and still have the athleticism is just like, it's not natural. It's not natural to see. You shouldn't be able to do that. I'm sorry, but those are the guys that make the difference, and that guy's probably going to make millions and millions and millions of dollars in the NFL someday.
All right, and then I know that there might be some people out there thinking, when are you going to have to do that in a football game? Well, no, that shows you how talented he is.
Exactly.
All right, Northwestern's coming to town. Big noon kickoff. Fox. I rarely promote, but I was just kind of floored by, oh, wow, that has to be the big noon game. Let me look at the rest of the college football day. Ohio State, Indiana is the ABC primetime game. What? It's not exactly a stellar schedule of college football this weekend.
I did not even see that. Oh my gosh. After we put them all in that 1 week, that two weeks ago was like the best slate ever. And now we're going 2-3 weeks without a good game. Come on now.
Yeah, I don't know what the Big Ten schedulers were thinking. I would think you would want 1 or 2 really good matchups every week and spread them out. Of course, you can't predict everything. I get that, but
you have to know that
usually Penn State are usually pretty good. Like
it's actually panned out that the top 5-ish Big Ten teams that usually are there this year. So it would be pretty simple to do that, I think. But I think a lot of Michigan fans are saying, thank God for October 30th, because we're ready for a big game here for sure.
All right, Michigan fans, if you believe in the transitive property, I'm going to give you a scare. Michigan defeats Rutgers 20-13 at home by 7 points. Northwestern able to defeat Rutgers 21-7, 14 points. Conversion rate, Northwestern wins by 7.
I'm not going to buy into it. Sorry, Mark. I'm sorry. I do love when people do a whole list of like how, Florida Atlantic somehow is better than Alabama by the transitive property. But I'm not going to buy into one game of football that Northwestern played against Rutgers, who's not really turning out to be a decent football team. I'm not buying in that they have figured it out on defense. But my gut here says, if you look at, the total defense in the Big Ten here, Northwestern is the bottom of the list, them in Illinois. And I have to imagine that with the rushing attack that Michigan has and Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins, that it might be a boring game, because I think Michigan is going to run it until they can't anymore, and Northwestern will be struggling to stop them.
I believe Michigan's in the neighborhood of a 23-24 point favorite. Seems reasonable. I could see them slopping through, or not necessarily slopping through, more from the standpoint of execution, run the ball, get out of town, we're done, we're good, or let's go home. They're not out of town. 24/7 game. They don't cover the spread. Or I could see them hit on some big pass plays as they mix it up a little bit, and maybe it's 42-7 and they cover the spread. Whatever. I'd be surprised if this is a game into the fourth quarter. Northwestern's built a great program there with Pat Fitzgerald, but this is not the year. They didn't cycle through on this year. That was last year. It's crazy how they've won division championships and then put like a 3-9 season in the middle of them.
It is. If you look at their like yearly records, it's like, whoa, what happened in that year?
Oh yeah.
But Pat Fitzgerald has done a great job with his recruiting classes of getting to that 1 year. Hey, we're building up to this 1 year where we have all our seniors back. and we're going to do this. And then he knows that the next year is going to be a tough one. And that, like you said, this is one of those years. And so a lot of people would call this a trap game, coming off a bye week, and you're probably looking ahead to MSU next week in a top 10 matchup between the Spartans and the Wolverines. I just think if it was on the road, maybe a little bit, but Northwestern, even on the road, it's 75% Michigan fans there anyway. So I just don't see how Michigan doesn't get the job done this week. I think they're going to put J.J. McCarthy in, pretty early, maybe have him play the entire second half. And that's where I think they could cover the spread. I think it, like you said, it could be a 24-7 game where they rush for 350 yards, but don't score that much because they have 8-minute drives. But I think they could air it out in the second half to get JJ his reps and get those receivers involved and things like that. That's how I see this game really getting broken up and open in the second half.
Talking Michigan football with Justin Rowe. Please join him on Blue by 90 podcast. And there's his Twitter handle right there, Justin Rowe 92. Michigan 6-0, Northwestern 3-3. At the big house this week. So the quarterback situation that you just mentioned, and the perfect opportunity you would think to get J.J. McCarthy a ton of reps. So I'll lay it out like this. Cade McNamara has done a capable job, a good job. He's not been outstanding. Give him a B. He can run the offense, make most of the throws, has missed on some downfield shots. Everyone will, but maybe he's missed on too many. All right, hasn't turned the ball over. That's key in this offense, in particular, any offense, but especially this offense, leaning on the running game. Okay, I got to think that the reasonable objective for this football team is to win the Big Ten Eastern Division. Don't worry about what you're going to do in the championship game or if you're going to get selected for a playoff or whatever. But also don't settle for, we went 2-4 last year. Let's go 9-3, and that's good. They can win the division. Okay. Can Cade McNamara win the division? So they play Michigan State in a couple weeks. Tough opponent. Michigan's better. They should win, but it wouldn't shock anyone if they lost the game, especially on the road. They've got Penn State. A lot is going to hinge on Sean Clifford's availability there. If Sean Clifford plays, based on what we know right now, I think it's reasonable to think that's a toss-up. Were they playing this year?
They're at Penn State.
At Penn State. So maybe less than a toss-up, but a 55-45 situation there. And then Ohio State will save them to the end because Cade McNamara could start for this team. They could roll into the game at 11-0. And he could still be playing the same Cade McNamara football that he's playing right now and probably will be. And they beat Michigan State 27-17, and they go into Happy Valley, and would be a tremendous win, but they win 27-24, and they're playing Ohio State, and they may not have the explosiveness that they need. So before I leave it in your hands, Justin, on the flip side, J.J. McCarthy gives you all this upside. Plus, you get him prepared, not that you should be thinking next year, but if he plays in those kind of games, Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State, wow, you know what you really got for 2022. But in addition to that, is his floor, because he's gotten into these games, and I credit Harbaugh in Michigan for doing with J.J. McCarthy what we saw, the classic example, Taquan Roberson in Penn State. He was a deer in headlights. Their offense was nothing. He just was incapable, and they lost a big game because of it. So McCarthy's ready to roll to a certain extent. He can run the offense. He's played at meaningful snaps against good teams. Is his floor that much lower than Cade McNamara, where you don't say, put him in, let him play, let him be the starter? Or is that does that send a bad message to the team that we're benching Cade McNamara, he's done the job, or are they waiting for it's a 7-7 game, or they're down 13-7 at half against Michigan State and the offense isn't doing much, so now's the time to make the switch?
I think you just spelled out what keeps Jim Harbaugh up at night every single night of this season. I think it's a conundrum that he doesn't know what to do. quite honestly, because in general, Jim Harbaugh has been very loyal to his guys, specifically his quarterback in the past. And as you said, Cade McNamara has not done anything to get pulled. He has not made mistakes. He's not, he has not done anything fantastic. He has made a couple, missed a couple throws, but they're by a foot, or something like that. It's not like Joe Milton and he's chucking the ball 30 yards over his head. So I think for him, and then you add in that we've had a Michigan tight end, a punter, their starting center on our podcast. Every single one of them has said Cade McNamara is the best leader and I would follow him into war. So I think that is the big factor right now that says Jim Harbaugh cannot consciously pull that guy that's leading his offense and not making mistakes and put in the younger talented guy, which, by the way, it's a tough decision. How many teams have we seen make that decision? Nick Saban in the national championship? How many? It's like it doesn't happen that often that it's this like simple decision to make and it's always going to work out. So it's this really tough decision. Now, when we look at JJ and what he brings to the table, I don't think his floor is lower than Cade McNamara's for any type of reason. He also has leadership qualities that as a 19-year-old, you don't see often at the quarterback position. He comes out there. He's a guy that is not like complaining that he's not getting in, but he's ready to go. He leads the team. People look up to him. He's coming off the bus at 4:30 in the morning from Nebraska and bringing guys out to practice. So those characteristics are all there for JJ as well. And then you put together his arm, his running ability that Cade McNamara very much does not have. And that's why JJ has gotten in. I think that JJ is the play here, but it's just really hard to say that because Cade, even if Cade had 4 or 5 picks right now, instead of just one, then it's easy to say, or maybe 3 or 4. But because he hasn't done that, I think Jim Harbaugh, with the way he's done things in the past and how he's still Jim Harbaugh, he's going to stick with Cade McNamara. So I do think to wrap this up, exactly what you said is going to happen for JJ to take control. Cade is going to have to make some mistakes, or the offense is just completely sputtering against MSU or against Penn State on the road, or one of those games where they need some type of spark and they put in JJ and he makes that big play. And it's this epiphany moment where Jim Harbaugh says, that was what we've been waiting for. I think we got to go for it.
Yeah, because what you don't want, although this is a best case scenario, worst case scenario at the same time, is you get by Michigan State and Penn State, capable, solid wins. McNamara is fine. You get to Ohio State and it's a blitzkrieg in the first half and he throws a couple picks and it's 28-7 at half.
And then you're putting JJ in and it's like, that's a no-win situation for JJ. He's got to do the unthinkable in order to win that ball game, So I totally agree with you. And I agree with you with a couple things. I agree with you that Jim Harbaugh, credit to him for getting him in the football in these games early and in meaningful snaps. It's been fantastic to see. And the Penn State situation was definitely, that was like, wow, Jim Harbaugh did this because of that exact situation. And so even if Cade McNamara doesn't get hurt, there may be a situation where they need to call on JJ to make something happen on the offense. And I do think he'll be ready. So I would not doubt one bit that in the Michigan State game, whether it's like Cade struggling himself or just the offense, like they're not scoring or the Michigan State's defense is stopping the run and they have to throw. They may throw JJ in and all of a sudden it's a Chad Henne, Drew Henson type situation. That was not correct, but Tom Brady. Drew Henson situation.
What happened to that Brady guy, by the way?
That Brady is somehow still the greatest player in football at 44 years old. But it might be that situation in the MSU game, and they might have some tricks up their sleeve that they've been waiting to reveal for a big game like MSU to win, that JJ might be the guy for.
Great stuff, Justin. Because you mentioned the name, I want to see if you saw what Joe Milton did. And I don't want to frame this the wrong way, because I try to reserve, as opposed to if this was an NFL channel, try to reserve just harsh criticism on collegiate athletes, but we evaluate the game, so you got to be critical to a certain extent. Did you see what Joe Milton did at the end of the Ole Miss Tennessee game?
I did not, actually. Well,
okay.
Let me know.
Joe Milton gets into the game. Hendon Hooker, the starter, was hurt. It's a really close game. Yeah. So he's moving them down the field. He shows his arm talent the play before, just barely misses a dude in the end zone that would have won the game, like throws a bullet, as he always does, sprinting to his right. So he misses on that throw. So then they have time. So it's not like they're rushing to the line. They've got an incomplete pass. They've got time, but there's like 4 seconds left in the game, something like. It's obviously the last play of the game. They're at the 20-yard line. They got to throw the ball into the end zone. He takes off and runs with it and doesn't like make a spirited effort toward the end zone, because once you do that, you're trying to dodge everyone and do anything you desperately can to make it. He runs out of bounds. The game's over.
Okay, now that you say it sparked my memory. I did see it, and it was just like, that's Joe Milton. He'll show you the play before that he's this ultra talented dude that can get it done, and then the next play you're like, what the hell was that? What are you doing? So I agree with you. I'm not out here to hate on Joe Milton. Good kid, I think, in general, and I'm not going to be that jealous ex-boyfriend type of person that I think some fans out there are. But I do totally agree with you. It's like, it's just with Joe Milton, it's just tough. You just shake your head, and then we all, to round it out, that quarterback room in 2020 at the beginning of 2020, before Dylan McCaffrey wanted to transfer, Dylan McCaffrey has like 600 passing yards through 6 games at Northern Colorado. So I don't know what the heck was going on in that QB room at the beginning of 2020 or in that summer camp, because to a lot of people, including us, we talked about they got 2 solid options. They can't go wrong here. One or the other is going to be the guy. And it just turns out that neither of them are. And it's like, what was going on? I don't get it.
Well, fortunately for Jim Harbaugh in Michigan, the right guys left.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree. So, it's gonna be interesting to see how both those guys end up panning out. But I do think it's safe to say now that they do actually have 2 good options in Cade McNamara and JJ McCarthy. That is not we're not looking at potential or their body size and what their athleticism could do. They've both shown on the field that they can get it done. And it's just, going to come down to the end of the year here and who's going to actually get the ball and get that snap.
Justin Rowe, Blue by 90 podcast. Join him there for Michigan Football Talk. Justin, we always appreciate the conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.